All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Midnight at the oasis, send your camel to bed. Shadows painting our faces, traces of romance in our hands. Heaven's holding a half moon, shining just for us. Let's slip off to a sand dune real soon. Kick up a little dust. Come on, cactus is our friend. He'll point out the way. Come on.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone on the all-new X Zone Broadcast Network, and we're also on the Talkstar Radio Network. And, my gosh, last count, over 85 podcast networks are now carrying the X Zone, as well as over 13 internet broadcasters. And we're on 12 different satellites, so there's no excuse for you not listening to the X Zone. Plus, this past weekend, X Zone TV is back, and we are streaming 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year, X Zone radio shows at www.xzonetv.com. My guest this hour is James Rollins, and he has a brand new book out entitled Altar of Eden. He is a best-selling author, and James is using his medical background and scientific knowledge to write novels and meld cutting-edge science and technology with history and religion, and which are as authentic and smart as they are entertaining. Now, in his new standalone thriller, Altar of Eden, which went on sale last month on the 29th, James looks at the brave new world of genetically modifying animals and human performance modifications, manipulating the human brain to produce better soldiers. Joining me now is the author of Altar of Eden and best-selling author, James Rollins. And James, welcome back to the X Zone. To you and yours, a very happy New Year.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a great time talking to you.
Tell me, genetically modifying animals with a manipulating human brains to make better soldiers. This sounds a little scientific-y, but it also sounds very realistic in what we're reading on, watching on the news, reading in the newspapers today. Are we this close to it really happening?
Well, actually, we are. The Defense Department's Research and Development group has been actually doing manipulation at the genetic level to try to enhance soldiers' intelligence, their ability to pick up sensory information. So they're already dabbling with manipulating us at the biological level to produce a better soldier. So this isn't actually fiction. This is going on right now.
Scary stuff. Where do you think that we'll see the advantages of having these genetically modified soldiers? What are the pros and what are the cons?
Well, the pros are that it's, again, hopefully saving lives if a soldier can get better input in the field, better sight, quicker reflexes, better ability to judge threat levels. Then, hopefully we'll see that that's actually going to save lives out in the field. Of course, a negative is how far are they going to stretch that? What are we going to end up with? How is this going to change people? Are these permanent changes? What happens when you create something that you don't anticipate? What if something gets loose? What if one of these soldiers turns bad?
Here we are in the year 2010, and we're looking at this and saying, no, this is very possible. We have genetically modified food, so why can't we genetically modify humans? But we also don't know what the results of the genetically modified foods are going to be yet, and it kind of raises a lot of questions as to, are we ready to proceed with genetically modifying humans or animals? James Rollins is our very special guest, and James, I've got about a minute before we go to a commercial break. Are we ready?
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, my concern with all this is my book last year, Doomsday Key, dealt with genetically modified plants and the lack of control and regulation in that industry. There's really a scant amount of safety research done, even for genetically researching plants. You bring that up to the front of animals, they are right now adding fluorescent proteins from jellyfish to cats to produce, cats that glow in the dark.
God.
If they're doing that already, where are they going to go to next? Especially with the lack of regulation going on. A little scary.
It sure is. James, thanks for being with us. James Rollins is our very special guest this hour. His new book, Altar of Eden, is out. And we're going to be talking to James about his book and much more as the X-Zone continues from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada on the all-new X-Zone Broadcast Network and on the Talkstar Radio Network. My name's Rob McConnell. We'll be back on the other side of this break. And listen, you can always send an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. Somebody will answer you because somebody is here 24 hours a day. I mean, besides myself. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Slip off to a sand dune real soon. Kick up a little dust. Come on, cactus is our friend.
When you were young and your heart was an open book, you used to say, live and let live. But if this ever-changing world in which we live in makes you give in and cry, say live and let die. Live and let die. Live and let die. Live and let
Welcome back, everyone. James Rollins is our special guest. www.jamesrollins.com. That's JamesRollins.com. He's the author of a brand new book that just came out a couple of days ago, Altar of Eden. And tell us a little bit about your new book.
Well, it deals with a New Orleans veterinarian who stumbles upon an exotic animal smuggling ring, which is a big problem, actually, in the U.S. right now. It's actually just behind gun running. And but something's not quite right with those animals. She discovers they've been genetically manipulated, genetically experimented upon, and she teams up with a Border Patrol agent to try to figure out what's been done to these animals and why, and how to stop them.
Now, your background, James, is as a veterinarian. You've had training in medicine, obviously. How much do you use the knowledge that you have as a veterinarian and instill it into the probability of genetic manipulation?
Well, my background in veterinary medicine, my undergraduate degree was in evolutionary biology. So a lot of the stuff that was going on, I continue to follow because I have a fascination with what's going on in the industry right now. And I was reading this article about a center in New Orleans called ACRES, which is an acronym for the Audubon Center for Research into Endangered Species. And they're doing using some cutting edge technologies to preserve various species. They're cloning animals, they're doing embryo hybridization, they have what they call a frozen zoo, where basically it's rows of liquid nitrogen tanks where they're storing the genetic material from these endangered species, so in case they do expire out in the real world, they had basically a genetic library so they can potentially resuscitate those animals back into the wild. And it's just fascinating stuff. And again, they're doing some cutting edge stuff, and some of the stuff makes me as a thriller writer, scratch my head a little bit and go, well, what if they carried that a few steps further? What might happen? And that became sort of the seed that became this book.
Where do you see genetic manipulation going in the future?
I think at this point it's an open book. They're already doing genetic manipulation in an attempt to control cancers. As we mentioned earlier, they're also using it to enhance soldiers. It's one thing when science is always going to try pushing that boundary, pushing that frontier a little bit further, and I don't think anything's off the table. And I'm not exactly against all of it. I'm actually curious where we might take this. Human evolution has carried us this far. The question is, are we going to, as scientists, and are we going to take control of that evolution? Are we going to take our next jump forward by our own manipulation? I don't know. There's lots of fun stuff to play with there.
Do you think that we're trying to play God more and more as we get the knowledge of not only genetic manipulation, but the other wonders that we're finally breaking through, including quantum physics?
Well, I don't know if it's playing God as so much as it is, human beings, since the cave time where we picked up a rock and struck something, we're always trying to manipulate our environment. Mm-hmm. And I think we just now have tools that are, can be misused. That's something I always love to explore in my novels, is that all my novels in the past have dealt with different technological issues. Have done cloning, have done stuff in all different sorts of sciences. But it's not so much the technology itself that is interesting to me. It's those moral questions that those technologies raise. It's not the cogs and the wheels that hit that technology that make for a good thriller. It's how those cogs and wheels sort of challenge us at the moral level, at the emotional level. That's what I love to explore in these novels. So that's something I do explore in this novel too. One of the sort of adversaries in this story is a very religious man, and yet he's doing this manipulation at the genetic level of human beings. And he has a sort of he's divided once he's sort of faced with what he's doing. And so that's something I love to explore. Is the villain isn't exactly black and white. He has different shades, and I love exploring that.
Why did you entitle your book The Altar of Eden?
It came about because of, at this point, a lot of this story deals with, what happened when man first became intelligent.
Wait a sec, hold on here. Did we finally get there and somebody didn't tell me?
Probably not. Some wonder. But basically, there's a lot of biblical references and ties back to the book of Genesis in this book, and so I titled it basically, somebody's been manipulating on that altar of Eden, what might come off that, what might result from that.
So we take the genetic manipulation, we look at it in animals, we see what we're doing, trying to genetically modify, but I don't see why we're modifying it. We're actually manipulating it. The food supply, we're modifying or genetically manipulating seeds for whatever use that they're using the crops for. And now
it's not just, and it's genetic manipulation of plants. They're not just altering a little gene here or there. They're actually taking animal genes and incorporating them into the DNA of these plants. They're just not minor alterations. They're pretty significant alterations. And last year, out of the 40 genetically modified plants that were approved to be grown in the U.S., only 8 have safety studies. And that's concerning. And one of the examples of because once you put a genetically modified plant out there in the environment, you lose control, because Mother Nature's pretty tricky. Wind's going to blow seeds, water's going to wash seeds somewhere else. And so, they found genetically modified plants growing 30 miles from a test field. And these test fields are fields that haven't been even approved what's growing in them. They just sort of let's put it out there and see what happens. And these things are escaping. So that's a little frightening. There was a corn called Starlink that was approved to be grown to be fed to animals, but not for people, because the people were having some bad allergic reactions to this. Yet within about 2 years, 300 different human corn products carried this this organism to the point where even Kellogg's cereal had it in it, and they had to do a major
Oh, my God.
multi-billion-dollar cleanup of the industry. So, when it comes to these manipulations, there's just not a lot of regulation, a lot of control, and there's some scary stuff going on in that industry. And just for one example, back in 2001, there's a company called Epicite.
Mm-hmm.
They developed the corn, and they built in a human contraceptive so that if you ate the corn, you become less fertile. Number one is, why did they even build that corn? And, they got a lot of bad press after that came out that they were doing this, and they supposedly sort of disappeared. And, the question of this today is, is that somewhere out there still? Something to keep in mind the next time you eat a corn chip.
How is the genetic manipulation and the modification of plants, people, animals affecting religious beliefs? Is there a lot of feedback from the religious icons as to science taking over the job of God? Is there any resistance?
They're oddly silent when it comes to genetically manipulating plants, but when it comes to genetically modifying humans, you are hearing a lot of leaders speaking against that. Similar, bans against cloning, restrictions about stem cell research. That all ties to genetic manipulation, genetic modification. And so already we're seeing that moral question being bandied about within religious circles. Because again, it is a big moral question: is what rights would a cloned person have? Is a cloned person truly a human? There's just a lot of things that we need to address. But the problem with this is that science has a tendency to jump forward a little faster than we have a chance to adjust to it. So the question is science going to jump faster than we have a chance to say, well, wait, whoa, let's back off from that, let's not do that. Because if there's a chance to do something, to produce a paper, it's probably going to be done in some lab somewhere. I mean, look at the South Korean scientists that were claiming that they were, cloning humans or close to cloning humans. If the science is there, someone's going to try to do it.
We can't even come to a consensus when it comes to an abortion, whether, when the fetus becomes a person. Here we are still, we're still arguing this in many circles.
I mean, we have a lot of questions about where life begins.
Exactly.
A lot of questions of, what makes a human being. There was just a study done, I think this past week I read an article about whether dolphins should be declared non-human persons, because the newest studies about their intelligence suggest that they have some near-human emotional and cognitive abilities. So, what rights should they have as, and so there's some talk about trying to declare them, non-human people or non-human persons so that they can, deal with legislation to protect dolphins. So, the whole question of intelligence, where's the line dividing animals and humans? Where's the line that defines the soul? These are all questions that are beginning to be blurred as science sort of stretches into that.
The ironic part is that, I've always believed that we should be on the bottom of the animal intelligence species totem pole, because other species on this planet don't cause the devastation and the death and the peril that we humans do.
Oh no, we are definitely one of the apex predators of this planet. There's no question about that at all.
James, please stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. X-Zone Nation. James Rollins is our special guest. His new book, Altar of Eden. His website is www.jamesrollins.com. And we'll be back on the other side of this news break as we continue from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the all-new X-Zone Broadcast Network and Talkstar Radio Network.
Makes you give in and cry. Say live and let die. Live and let die. Live and let die. Live and let die.
My name is Michael Telstar, Canada's leading mentalist from Toronto, Ontario.
Hi, my name is Splinza, and you're listening to my dad, Rob McConnell, on the X-Zone.
This is Psychic Dorothy from St. Catharines, and you're listening to Rob McConnell.
Hello, my name is Holly Reeves, an astrologer from Astro For You, and you're listening to Canada's #1 paranormal radio show, The X Zone, with Rob McConnell.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Everybody's talking at me. I don't hear words they're saying, only the echoes of my mind. People stop and staring, I can't see their faces, only the shadows of their eyes. I'm going where the sun keeps shining through the pouring rain, going where the weather suits my clothes, banking off of the northeast winds, sailing on summer breeze.
James Rollins is our special guest. He's the author of Altar of Eden. You know, you and I were talking about the religious implication of genetic manipulation, and I was talking about, you know, we haven't even solved the problem about when a fetus is a person, when a fetus is a life, and the entire abortion issue is still up in the air, even though certain states have legislated the act of an abortion to be legal. It's a personal choice or whatever. What is going to happen with, for example, let's say little Tommy has been cloned, and little Tommy, the clone, takes over the actual existence of little Tommy, the person. What kind of can of worms are we opening here as far as a society?
There's a whole bunch of strange questions that come up when it comes to cloning. You know, Dolly was the first sheep that was cloned, and what they found out from looking at her DNA after the little kid was born was that her DNA was actually still old. There, at the end of all DNA, there's little last few segments are called telomeres, and as we age, those telomeres begin to fray, and they're almost like little fuses for our longevity. As you run out of telomeres, then you die. That's what causes us to age. It's these fraying of these telomeres. And so when they manipulated this sheep, they found out that even though it was a youngster, her DNA was old. Her telomeres were already frayed because they took adult DNA, and so she ended up expiring early because she was already developing a lot of these age issues. So again, if you manipulate a human, you create this Tommy clone. Tommy might be a clone and look like a youngster, but in some ways his DNA is old. And that what interests me, and something I may eventually write a book about, is the fact that there is such things as genetic memory. That certain animals are born with the immediate ability to know how to hunt and know how to recognize prey. And the question is, where is this memory coming from? There's new evidence suggesting that a certain amount of our race memory is in that DNA. So the question then I have is, if Tommy's clone and there's some memory in his DNA of his existence as Tommy number one, how's that going to start messing things up? There's a bunch of questions we do not have answers to. We're pushing this boundary without, we're leaping with not looking when it comes to a lot of the science.
Do we really need to be pushing this boundary at this time in our evolution?
I certainly don't see the need for doing that. I think we have bigger problems than needing to clone human beings. Heaven knows there's enough human beings running around this planet that I don't think we necessarily have to be producing more in a petri dish. I think it's more concerns about overpopulation than actually the need to produce cloned humans. Just the fact that we can do it. The question is then, should we do it? And my feeling is we need to be a lot more discussion, a lot more talk among scientists. In this case, amongst even religious leaders, before we sometimes make that leap.
James Rollins is our special guest, www.jamesrollins.com. He's the author of a new book, Altar of Eden, and that's at www.jamesrollins.com. Let's just talk a little bit about the manipulation of genetics when it comes to humans for the perfect soldier. How is science trying to make this happen? Once again, here we are in the year 2010. Do we really need to create killing machines out of people when we, instead of pointing and doing more research on the electronic aspect so that we can fight electronically instead of physically?
Well, that's both sciences are beginning to merge. We're now finding DARPA's working with producing helmets and goggles that actually wire into the human brain directly. So we're seeing basically the creation of almost a cyborg type of soldier, where we're interfacing computerized technology with the human brain through actually active contacts in the brain. So both things are actually merging together. Which is, again, are we moving too fast in that world? Probably so. And that is, to me, a bit disconcerting.
It's a little scary, and once again, why they are doing this when there is so many other problems on this planet that could be worked on. For example, the hunger issue that is rampant throughout several parts of the world. People don't believe that there are homeless cases, not only in the poorer countries, the third world nations, but even in Las Vegas, and I talked about this last month. There's an entire school district where 80% of all children in the city of Las Vegas, Nevada, are homeless.
That is frightening. And it's not just a matter of homelessness; it's a matter of also, the food supply is, the population is expanding faster than our ability as this planet to produce food to feed that. And we're going to be hitting a tipping point at some point where there was a study done by a think tank called the Club of Rome. They produced a paper called Limits to Growth. And they anticipated that at some point we're going to hit that tipping point where growth is going to outstrip our ability to produce food. And if we actually hit that point, it's going to be such chaos that they did a statistical model trying to figure out what might happen if we reach that point. And what they found out is that when we hit that at the rate we're growing the population and the rate in which we're producing food, that there'll be such chaos during that period of time that actually probably about 90% of the human population will be killed off.
Holy cow.
From war, starvation, from pestilence, basically the four horses of the apocalypse. And this study that was done in the mid-1970s by this think tank. And a lot of the current scientists sort of poo-pooed that and said, that wouldn't happen. They were not, they weren't correlating the model correctly. So a couple of universities set out to disprove that assessment, and using the latest computer technologies and censuses and all the information that we have at hand currently right now, they repeated that study, and their conclusion was that report was probably overly optimistic, that things probably actually be worse than that. So that's the state of the world we're at right now. So the question is, do we really need to be cloning more people? Do we need to be creating super soldiers? There are bigger things to address than that.
Now, you see, I agree with the modification and manipulation of plants for feeding the world. I agree with that. Okay, if we have to do something, let's do it constructively. If we have to clone animals to feed the hungry, I don't know if there's an ethical issue here. But you know what? I'd rather see humans fed than to see them die of hunger. When it comes to using genetic modification or manipulation to fight disease, I am for that 100%. But just to get into the genetic manipulation and modification to enhance the ability to kill, that's where I'm dead against it.
And again, there's bombs, hidden time bombs, or hidden dangers in that manipulation that we really haven't addressed yet. And in that there's a condition called atavism. It's where a genetic trait thought lost to a certain species reappears, such as I use my example in the book, is I feature this python that they discover that has reptilian functional legs. So at one point, snakes had legs. Over evolutionary time, the legs were lost. But that genetic memory is still locked in the DNA, and so occasionally there'll be a mistake in a little mutation that occurs, and those legs will reappear. Now, I wrote that thinking, well, this is pretty far-fetched. But then after I wrote the book and I was doing my final edits, I got a note from one of my readers who's generally sends me some great information about different weapons and different pieces of science and pieces of history that might interest me. And she sent me this article about these two kids in China who, and there's pictures on my website if you want to see this, a couple kids in China found a snake in the wild that had a fully functional reptilian limb sticking out of its side.
Wow.
By the way, I just love when that happens. She emailed me, you should write about this, and I emailed her back, well, I already did. It's sort of odd that happened right after I was writing the book. But that's what, when it comes to genetics, there are many things we just don't know. We've got everything mapped out from the human genome, but all it means is that we have the code. We don't necessarily know, we can't read that code.
But do we really have the code, or do we really have the code, or do we only have the part of the code that we can understand, and the part that we can't understand or do not realize that other part actually exists is what we really need, because we're playing with half a deck right now.
Exactly. I wouldn't even say half a deck. I would say we're dealing with one card out of the deck.
Wow.
When it comes to human DNA, currently right now they consider only a very small fraction of human DNA to be functional. Most human DNA is junk DNA. We don't know what it does. It just seems to be there. And I'm talking about 80% of our genetic code is considered junk. Only a small percentage, only about 20% of that, is functioning. So the question is, what's happening in that other 80% that we really don't know about? Why are we carrying that around? What's in that DNA? When we start manipulating things, it's like pulling a thread on the sweater. You start pulling a thread, and before you know, you've unraveled the whole sweater. And so you start picking at this DNA. When we only know a small portion of that is functional, what happens when we start affecting that thing, that other 80%? We really don't know why it's there. What might be unleashed? Is there memories in there? Is there, what type of, what part of our evolutionary path is hidden in that code? So again, in my case, I think we're probably only playing with one card out of that deck.
That's scary just to think that we've got scientists around the world who are trying to play God, and they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Exactly. I use a quote at the beginning of my book, and I'm going to paraphrase. It actually came from H.G. Wells' book, The Island of Dr. Moreau. I'm trying to remember how that line exactly goes, but it says, once man begins to study nature, eventually man becomes as callous as nature. Basically, once we start manipulating that, there's no telling what might happen. Here's the quote. Here it is. The study of nature makes a man at last as remorseless as nature. I think this was written by H.G. Wells, back at the turn of the century. But I think this holds even more aptly today.
Tell me, when you're looking at what you know is going on, when you can just imagine what is going on.
Oh, it's like a tip of an iceberg. We can see the iceberg floating above the water, but down below is this huge, gigantic mass. And part of the thing I bring up in my book is about unlicensed labs that are popping up all over the world is that a lot of U.S. corporations have found that they can circumvent laws regarding how far they can stretch their science, what they can do to animals, animal cruelty issues. They found that if they open labs outside the U.S. borders, they can circumvent those laws. And so we're seeing these sort of secret labs popping up on the Caribbean islands. We're seeing them pop up in other countries, a lot of East Bloc countries. So yeah, and no one knows what's going on in those labs. So
scary
we are
stuff.
literally just looking at the tip of the iceberg. Things we're talking about today on this program is probably, again, just a shadow of what's really going on.
I'm just wondering now if a lot of these so-called alien encounters that people are having in remote places could actually be the result of genetic manipulation from some science lab.
I would not be surprised. I have no doubt at this point going on right now in multiple labs that they are doing some pretty scary human genetic manipulation. Basically, there's a lot of human trafficking going on in the world. People have a tendency to disappear. I would not at all be surprised that there's not some pretty scary stuff going on in regards to what's going on in those labs.
James, stand by. You and I have to take our final break.
All right.
This is scary food for thought. Exonation. James Rollins is our special guest. The name of his book, Altar of Eden. Check out his website, www.jamesrollins.com. www.jamesrollins.com. Send me your emails with your thoughts on genetic manipulation, and we'll forward them to James. I'm sure he'd love to hear your thoughts as well. But go to his website, get his book. It's a great book, and we'll be talking more to James on the other side of this break as we continue live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada on the X-Zone Broadcast Network and Talkstar. James Rollins is our special guest. And first of all, James, as always, great having you on the show. Congratulations on another bestseller.
Thank you.
Over the break, I was thinking, here in 1947 in Roswell, New Mexico, an alleged UFO crashed and these little gray aliens were seen. Now, if you're talking about a government conspiracy, to me it makes more sense that these so-called aliens are actually the product of genetic engineering experimentation gone wrong rather than little green men from other planets. The Raelians, the International Raelian Association or movement, years ago started getting into genetic manipulation and cloning because they believed that the planet Earth was discovered by outcast scientists from another planet who were kicked off of their planet for doing genetic experimentation. And I read that, and then I figured, well, wait a minute, maybe these guys are onto something. Maybe the first book of the Bible should actually be Noah's Ark, where Noah is a captain of a spacecraft, and in the spacecraft were all these dissident scientists, and the animals 2 by 2 could actually be the DNA of animals from their planet that they created life forms here. Now, years ago that would have been looked at as a woo-woo factor, but I believe today with what we know and what we can only theorize that science is doing, that this may in fact be a possibility.
Well, it is an interesting, a lot of times if you look at the Bible, many of the Bible passages are very allegorical, very metaphorical. So again, an ark with, carrying, obviously physically you couldn't carry all the animals 2 by 2, no matter how many cubits that ark was. But considering the frozen zoo that was at the Acres facility, where within just a small room and a bank of liquid nitrogen tanks, they're storing hundreds of species within one tank. So that does make a certain amount of sense that maybe that is an allegory for spaceship, where they do have the genetic storage of all these different species.
James, as always, it is so great talking to you. Again, congratulations on your new book. Tell our listeners where they can get copies.
Any stores, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Borders, Costco, it's pretty much everywhere. And for more information on James Rollins and the other great books he's written, www.jamesrollins.com. That's www.jamesrollins.com. James, what now? What other projects are you working on? I'm just have the second book in my children's book series comes out in April, and then I have another one of my Sigma 4 series coming out in the summer.
James, as always, we look forward to having you on the show, and I'll send you copies of the emails that the listeners send us on genetic manipulation.
Thank you.
You take care of yourself. Thanks very much for joining us. Exonation, James Rollins has been our guest this hour, www.jamesrollins.com. We were talking about James' new book, Altar of Eden. It was just released on December the 29th. It's available at all online bookstores as well as your local favorite bookstore. And if they don't have it, tell them to get it. I'll be back on the other side of this news break as the X Zone continues live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada on the all-new X Zone Broadcast Network and Talkstar. Don't go away.